In this episode, we take you inside the BrandBucket marketplace to explore what makes it different from every other domain platform out there. Margot Bushnaq, founder and CEO of BrandBucket, shares how curation plays a critical role in quality, how naming trends have shifted over the years, and what both buyers and sellers can do to succeed in a competitive naming landscape. From iconic brand launches to tips for staying in the game long term, this conversation is packed with real experience and forward-looking insight. Let's jump in.
Hi,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Okay, let's do it again.
No need. People can watch me drinking water.
All right, okay. Today we're going to be talking about BrandBucket domain sales success. Inside the BrandBucket marketplace, we're going to go into the core. What makes BrandBucket different from other domain marketplaces?
It was the first marketplace to actually curate its listings, which was a really big deal because prior to that point, marketplaces like Cedo were a free-for-all, and there were millions of domain names being added. And for us to come in with a particular taste and to create a boutique-like experience, really it helps if your buyers have the same taste as you, but it cut out so much work from someone having to sift through domain names to be able to kind of really narrow down to quality names that are priced right and save time.
Great. How does the curation process affect the quality of names listed?
Well, we have certain factors that we have to curate for right off the bat, which is spelling, pronunciation. We don't allow hyphens in the names. We prefer .com, even though we do accept a few other specific extensions that are more accepted by startups. But overall, after filtering all of that for quality, there's kind of the more hidden quality of a name, the things that make it memorable. So if something has a good sound, if it has letter alliteration, if it's two words, if it has a common vowel sound on the middle that makes it very poetic. In the case of an invented name, if it can actually be pronounced across multiple languages, or if as soon as you see it, you can say it. And if two different people say it the same way, that's a huge plus. So what it boils down to is there's lots of great names that don't make the cut, but the ones that do really are, like, a buyer can come in and feel confident that someone with experience in naming has kind of looked at this, and if they have no other peer to run it by, they can go ahead and make the purchase because they know that it's a great name.
Makes perfect sense. I guess, it just always, in a way, brings me back to, BrandBucket being the first marketplace to actually coin the term brandable domain name. Brandable being, I can actually take this shell and actually build a brand with it, ultimately. So, in a sense, you're living up to that initial expectation, is that everything is driving, the curation process is driving towards making sure that the name is truly brandable and it can become and be able to stand on its own as a brand.
And a big part of what that brandable means is that it's broad enough to be used by a couple of different companies or a couple of different industries or in a couple of different ways.
Yep.
There are a name like sofas.com is not a bad name. It's a very expensive name, but it really can only be used for one purpose, and it's to sell sofas. But any name on BrandBucket can come in and appeal to a number of buyers. Like different people from all different walks of life can come in and like that name for a different reason. And part of what elevates the prices of premium names is having a larger buyer pool. Like the more buyers you have, the more competition there is, the better.
Yep.
And so when we specifically look for names that are broad enough to, to have a buyer pool that, that can compete for it, then everyone wins in the long run.
Yeah. And building up on your example of sofas.com, I hear the name and I expect what I'm buying from there. But you mentioned in a previous segment the term sofa.com is a great brand and can actually be used for anything, not just selling sofas. And
you could use it for therapy because you lie on a sofa. You could use it for any kind of consultancy company because you sit down and have a conversation on the sofa.
Yeah, just like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. What do buyers typically look for when browsing BrandBucket?
A lot of buyers come to BrandBucket because they either have hit a dead end in their brainstorming process, or they already know about BrandBucket and they know that it's just a great place to go to kind of be flooded with ideas. And so every buyer is looking for something different, but ultimately they're looking for something that just kind of creates that spark in them. And the majority of buyers that we see spend a lot of time on the site. They end up favoriting many, many names, and they're going through and they're just finding things, like, hey, that could work, and this could work for a completely different reason. Or, hey, I didn't even think about this option. Let me look at some invented names and see if any kind of strike a chord with me there. And so whatever the buyer is looking for, there's a lot of different types of names, and hopefully they're open-minded enough where they can find something of each type that they like until they narrow down the perfect one.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, next we're going to talk about sales performance and trends. What kind of domain names tend to sell best on BrandBucket? Everybody wants to know.
There's no best. Really, especially in the brandable domain name space, it's all about having your name in front of the buyer, the right buyer at the right time. And so it helps if your name has characteristics that buyers like, if it can be easily pronounced, or if it sounds good, or if it has some sort of evocative visual, with colors or animals or that sort of thing. But what it comes down to is just having it be creative enough that someone can fall in love with it. It's very hard to fall in love with a boring keyword name. And just any little bit of joy. Like I find that the names that at least I'm not surprised when they sell, have that joy within them. Like that someone came to it and they're like, you know what, that's super cool. And I know it doesn't mean a whole lot for what I'm doing, but it sounds good and it's just cool. So I think but that's not easy to go. You can't just go out and find a bunch of names, that are fun and have that joy and that are cool. But you know them when you see them. Some that are just like, oh wow,
yeah,
I wish I thought of that.
Something that makes your heart warm.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. How has the demand for brandable domains changed over time?
I think marketplaces like BrandBucket have elevated brandable names. I think if they didn't exist, all buyers would still just be buying keyword type names because that's the word that they took into a search of a several million domain name database, and what came out was something that matched their word exactly. And so I think I would like to hope that startups being able to kind of get more creative out of the box options, they've been helped along by marketplaces that help those options be found and help those deals close.
Okay. Are there seasonal or trend-based spikes in domain sales?
Nothing you can put a finger on. I mean, there's historically a little bump in September. I think there's a lot of the same energy with back to school as there is with let me start a business. And tax season always is a little wonky, right around the day where people have to cut a big check. They're not thinking so much about spending. So there's a little lull for a week or so. But other than that, there's always people starting businesses.
Yeah.
And there's
Well,
no
tax
friend.
season, you get the tax refunds after that lull, and then you see a spike, I'm hoping, or
Maybe that accounts for like the month before
yeah.
taxes are due if people were on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Success factors for sellers. What can sellers do to improve the chance of their domains being sold?
I think if you curate your own inventory with things that you would personally start a business with, you're going to maximize your success. Going back to a previous video, if you can look at each name and ask yourself, why wouldn't I use this? Like, what is the flaw or flaws in this name? You start to see the gems more. And if you can cull and if you can kind of get rid of names that maybe the buyer pool isn't so big, or maybe this is targeting a very specific industrial niche that doesn't seem to have big pockets. They don't get a lot of VC funding. Buyers in this pool, they're starting recipe blogs and they don't have a lot of money right off the top. And so if you really look at it from the eyes of the buyer, you're going to be successful.
How does pricing, naming style, or presentation affect buyer interest?
I think for the buyer that's needing help with their brainstorming, that they're a completely open book and they're not looking for something very specific, the longer you can keep them around, the more options you can put in front of them and the more likely they are going to find something they like. So presentation and user interface is a huge factor in that. Your idea to put logos with the names on our original database of domain names for our own use, just so it was more pretty for us because we were tired of looking at a spreadsheet. That really resonated when people found our website. They were able to spend 2 hours to look at names where otherwise, if they're looking at a spreadsheet, they'd be shot in half an hour. And so I think making a website, that loads fast and that's pretty and that has proper aesthetics goes a long way in keeping a buyer around and having them return over and over again.
Yeah. What common mistakes do domain sellers make, and how can they avoid them?
I think the biggest mistake is copycat. So if a seller makes a sale with a particular keyword or hears about a sale with a particular keyword, then goes out and tries to buy every variation of that keyword that they can without taking into account the placement of the word, or if they're buying 2 words and one of the words is that keyword, and if the 2 words make sense to each other, if they sound good together, you're going to not only kind of, you're hedging your bet, you're trying to hedge your bet by, covering all your bases, like maybe I'll buy 20 and sell 1, but you've spent 20, the money to buy the 20, and you don't necessarily want to do that. But then at the same time, there could have been that one buyer out there that loved that keyword, and maybe nobody else likes it. Or maybe that one buyer is trying to find their own niche in a very crowded space, and because they got that keyword, now nobody else wants that keyword. Like you always need to keep an eye on something that's broad and that has a buyer pool, and don't do a copycat trends.
Yep. Great. Next, we're going to talk about the customer experience and feedback. What feedback have you heard from founders who've purchased names through BrandBucket?
I think the most common feedback that I hear is, I wish I knew about you, either for my previous company, or I wish I knew about you 2 months ago when I started this whole naming process. Because for a lot of people, shopping for something and going through a list until you find the right thing is so much easier than creating the right thing. It's very hard to be creative, but it's very easy to be a critic. And so when you're browsing a list of curated names, you can be a critic and you can not like 100 of them and then like the one and then not like the next 100. And it's just a mindset that's a lot easier for people. And so when buyers find BrandBucket and find a great name and make the purchase, and the purchase is seamless, they come back around and they're like, you saved me so much time. I wish I knew about you before, and I'm definitely using you for my next business.
How does the platform support buyers during and after their purchase?
During the purchase, we have a great sales team that they can interact with. Once the purchase is made, they get passed on to a transfer team that tells them every step of the way of what's going to be happening, the timeline. And after purchase, we follow up, make sure they've renewed their name, that they've updated their contact information. We answer any questions they may have about hosting. We have a lot of recommendations for next stages of the business. The sample logo that we provide, a lot of people just want to use that logo right off the bat because it looks nice and they don't have to worry about a custom logo at this point in their journey. And even after all of that, if whatever business they had in mind for that domain name doesn't take off, they know they can always come back around and resell the domain name with us because it is an asset.
Yeah. Are there any standout stories of successful businesses launches that started with a BrandBucket domain?
Yeah, I think I love the stories where the buyers didn't have a name in mind and they actually used the platform how it's intended to be used and just went through until they found the right one. And there's Envato that did that. They knew they wanted something that meant nothing, that sounded good, and that one struck a chord with them and they bought it, and now it's a very big marketplace for digital products. There's Zomato, which we talked about in a previous episode. Again, they came in, they didn't think of Zomato themselves. They came in, looked around in the food-related names because they were starting a food business and saw that one and fell in love with it. And I've heard the story of Mattermark, where that founder, she came in also as a blank slate, had no idea what she was going to use, browsed around, saw Mattermark, somehow knew that it was the perfect name for what she was building, didn't really know why, but made sense, and then built up and later sold a platform for tracking VC funding and startup in everything in the startup world. So the stories where it wasn't the buyer thinking of it and coming to buy it, and it was more they came in to use BrandBucket as a service, I love, because that's what it was built for.
Awesome. That's great. Vision and future opportunities. How does BrandBucket plan to evolve in the domain space moving forward?
We've been around for 20 years. We have evolved during that time. We aren't big and showy usually about how we evolve. We evolve very slowly. We do a lot of metrics and foresight and modeling off of any change we plan to do. We don't want to disrupt, our ecosystem too much, because we do have sellers that rely on us, and we don't want to disrupt their business for the sake of just, being new and flashy. But we're always keeping up with trends. We want to always build for the buyer. And if buyers are asking for something in particular, or if we see other e-commerce sites doing something in particular, we evolve that way. But overall, we don't want to stray too far from our roots. Our roots were to build a curated marketplace that was fun to browse for buyers, and adding a lot of bells and whistles just for the sake that, one person asked for it or we're bored with how things are. Anything that distracts from that core is just that. It's a distraction. And BrandBucket is still the only marketplace that does what it does, that serves the buyer particularly. And if we evolved too much away from that, there would be a gap and someone else would come to fill it.
That's great. That's true. Actually, I'm just thinking, like there is no other marketplace that is as strict as BrandBucket as far as the pricing strategy, the curation process, the customer experience, and the noise signal. Like am I building a marketplace of domain names, or am I adding all these additional services on top, or distracting the buyer with all these additional things that could potentially be looked at as a negative in a time where you're really looking to actually name your business. So.
Or too many distractions. So you want the buyer to focus in on one thing at a time. Yep. And if the domain name is the most expensive piece of that purchase, you got to focus in on the domain name.
Yep. What advice do you have for domainers looking to grow within the BrandBucket ecosystem?
I think the biggest pain point for domainers starting with a marketplace like BrandBucket is finding out which domain names of theirs match our taste and will make the cut. And a lot of people want to get domain names accepted because once they're accepted, they do have an inherent value in the world. They can trade hands on the wholesale market much easier. We offer a guaranteed wholesale price on it. But it's very hard to kind of get your acceptance rate up or to get any names accepted at all. So a great place to start is we have our own seller-to-seller trading platform where names that are already accepted can change hands, and you can build your portfolio kind of risk-free by kind of building it with names that already have an existing listing, and you don't have to go through the creative process yourself.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that definitely adds a lot of value. Okay. What mindset should sellers have to stay motivated and successful in the long run?
The fact that it is a long run, that sell-through rates are low, and that it can take 10 to 15 years for a name to sell.
Yeah.
This is not a get-rich-quick business at all.
It'll take 10 to 15 years for a name to sell, but then with a portfolio of names with a certain sell-through rate, 100 names, you expect to sell a handful of names that will help fund and help keep the process moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to that note, I think constantly adding to your portfolio, if you can afford it, and if not, trimming from your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
You're not only increasing the opportunities for sale, but sometimes subconsciously or not, your taste is evolving. And if you just buy a set of names and stop, you're not going to be as successful as if you just keep adding and keep improving and keep learning. Just even with my own portfolio, I've noticed that when I pause and I stop buying any new names, my sales take a hit. And there's something magical about constantly adding. Even adding something new tends to sell something old. It's just, I don't know, it's the law of attraction maybe. But yeah, constantly adding and constantly, just being mindful of your portfolio, I think, helps in the long run.
Yeah, I guess the success of sellers on the platform is gonna, persistence, constantly learning, as you said, and everything that they can do on their side to follow the advice that you give them. Let me kind of maybe take you in a different path where you've been, like we mentioned before, you've coined the term, brandable domains. You were the first marketplace to put logos on domain names to try to sell them. The first marketplace to put a description on a name, or even potential industries, or what the feeling that you get from a name, especially if it's an invented name, that will resonate with the buyer. You're the first to be strict about pricing the name fairly so that it is sellable, and many other firsts that BrandBucket was able to bring to the industry and kept you in the business for 20 plus years so far. What's the next first that you feel BrandBucket will be able to accomplish, or you wish BrandBucket will be able to accomplish, to allow you to continue to serve your sellers and buyers?
I'm not going to give that up.
Okay.
I have something in mind, but I'm not going to give it up.
Awesome. All right. Well,
you spent all that time asking it, and I don't have an answer for you.
That's okay. That's all right. But something is cooking, you're saying?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you for the time. Appreciate you providing this insight, and looking forward to talking to you on the next segment. From creative discovery to customer experience, BrandBucket is more than a marketplace. It's a partner in how you build and launch your brand. If you're ready to find a name that sets your business apart, visit brandbucket.com and browse thousands of curated premium brand names designed to help you stand out. And if you're a domainer, seller, or startup builder, this is where naming meets momentum. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.